With question 84 of Prima Secunda, we enter into the final 6 questions of this treatise on evil habits, vices, and sins, going all the way to question 89. And this one is called the cause of sin, one sin causing another. And like I've said many times, I don't always like the title that St. Thomas Aquinas gives for these questions, because these 4 articles are actually quite interesting. I don't know if that title grabs you or not, but he's going to be talking about the cause of all sins, the root of all sins, covetousness and pride, also the 7 deadly sins, and what are there capital sins, and that kind of thing. So it's quite interesting, and it has to do with something that I think a lot of people are already familiar with, as in the deadly sins. But what exactly does St. Thomas Aquinas say about them, and how are they all connected to the other things that we've learned previously as well? So there's 4 articles. This isn't a very long question. The first one says whether covetousness is the root of all sins, right? So I think sometimes people will get covetousness and pride confused, because they might say, wait, I thought pride was the root of all sins. But he's going to say pride is the beginning of all sins, and covetousness is the root of all sins. There is a similarity, but also a distinction as well. So with this one about whether covetousness is the root of all sins, otherwise it's known as avarice, where you want things, you want to hold on to things, or kind of an attitude of seeking to have things inordinately that maybe you shouldn't have. He says, according to some, covetousness may be understood in different ways. First, as denoting inordinate desire for riches, and thus it is a special sin. Secondly, as denoting inordinate desire for any temporal good, and thus it is a genus comprising all sins, because every sin includes an inordinate turning to a mutable good. Okay, so in that regard, if you're turning inordinately to a mutable good, that would be a general sin, and therefore it might be the root of all sins. Thirdly, as denoting an inclination of a corrupt nature to desire corruptible goods inordinately. And they say that in this sense, covetousness is the root of all sins, comparing it to the root of a tree, which draws its sustenance from the earth, just as every sin grows out of the love of temporal things. Okay, so that's the first paragraph, and in and of itself, that probably would answer it. But then he adds a second paragraph where he says, now, though all this is true, it does not seem to explain the mind of the apostle. Now, when Thomas talks about the apostle, he's talking about Paul, when he states that covetousness is the root of all sins. For in that passage, he clearly speaks about those who, because they will become rich, fall into temptation and into the snare of the devil. For covetousness is the root of all evils. Hence, it is evident that he is speaking of covetousness as denoting the inordinate desire for riches, which is the first one that he listed in the 3 in the previous paragraph. Accordingly, we must say that covetousness, as denoting a special sin, is called the root of all sins, and likewise to the root of a tree in furnishing sustenance to the whole tree, which he already explained. For we see that by riches man acquires the means of committing any sin whatever, and of sating his desire for any sin whatever, since money helps man to obtain all manner of temporal things, according to Ecclesiastes 10:19. All things obey money, so that in this desire for riches is the root of all sins. So I think he's saying there in the second paragraph that if you take St. Paul's passage, really St. Paul is more focused on riches. But if you take about it more generally, he would be speaking about just the inordinate desire for any kind of good thing, which is the definition of sin when it's inordinate, right? Article 2, whether pride is the beginning of every sin. Some say pride is to be taken in 3 ways. Okay, 3 again, right? First, as denoting inordinate desire to excel, and thus it is a special sin. Secondly, as denoting actual contempt of God to the effect of not being subject to his commandments, and thus we say it is a generic sin. Thirdly, as denoting an inclination to this contempt owing to the corruption of nature, and in this sense they say that it is the beginning of every sin, and that it differs from covetousness, because covetousness regards sin in turning towards a mutable good, by which is sin, as it were, nourished and fostered for which reason covetousness is called the root, whereby pride regards sin as turning away from God, to whose commandment a man refuses to be subject, for which reason it is called the beginning of evil consists in turning away from God. So just a quick way of explanation. When you sin, you turn away from God and towards immutable good. So the turning away from God is pride. The turning towards immutable good would be covetousness. And in a mortal sin, you do both, because you're turning away from God and towards an immutable good. Whereas I think even in a venial sin, you might turn towards immutable good, but not necessarily away from God, and that's the distinction between the two. St. Thomas continues, now, though all this is true, nevertheless it does not explain the mind of the wise man who said in Ecclesiastes 10:15, pride is the beginning of all sin. For it is evident that he is speaking of pride as denoting inordinate desire to excel, as is clear from what follows. And then he quotes from that same passage, God hath overturned the thrones of proud princes. Indeed, this is the point of nearly the whole chapter. We must therefore say that pride, even as denoting a special sin, is the beginning of every sin. For we must take note that in voluntary actions, such as sins, there is a twofold order of intention and of execution. In the former order, the principle is the end, as we have stated many times. Now, man's end in acquiring all temporal goods is that through their means we may have some perfection and excellence. Okay, so the reason why we attain temporal goods is for our excellence, in order to build ourselves up in some way or another. Therefore, from this point of view, pride, which is the desire to excel, is said to be the beginning of every sin. On the other hand, in the order of execution, the first place belongs to that by which furnishing the opportunity of fulfilling all desires of sin has the character of a root, and such are riches, so that from this point of view, covetousness is said to be the root of all sins, as stated above. So in both cases, he lays out a threefold definition of covetousness and pride. And then in the second paragraph, he goes into Scripture and says, well, hold on, let's see what Scripture has to say. And then he kind of qualifies it a little bit. So hopefully that made sense. So according to Scripture, covetousness is the inordinate desire for riches, and pride would be the inordinate desire for excellence. But as far as the sinfulness of it, pride is turning away from God, and covetousness is an inordinate turning towards immutable good. All right, Article 3, whether any other special sins besides pride and avarice should be called capital. Now, we know there's 9 capital or deadly sins. The word capital is derived from caput, which means a head. Now, the head, properly speaking, is that part of an animal's body which is the principle and director of the whole animal. Hence, metaphorically speaking, every principle is called a head, and even men who direct and govern others are called heads. Accordingly, a capital vice is so called in the first place from head taken in the proper sense, and thus the name capital is given to a sin for which capital punishment is inflicted. It is not in this sense that we are now speaking of capital sins, but in another sense, in which the term capital is derived from head taken metaphorically for a principle or director of others. In this way, capital vice is one from which other vices arise, chiefly by being their final cause, which origin is formal. Okay, so now here we're going back to Aristotle's 4 causes: final, formal, efficient, and material. Therefore, a capital vice is not only the principle of others, but also their director and, in a way, their leader, because the art or habit to which the end belongs is always the principle and the commander in matters concerning the means. Hence, Gregory compares these capital vices to the leaders of an army. Okay, so they're the head, they're the leaders, the others follow along. And so these capital vices, the 9 of them, the deadly sins, are going to fall into that category. Finally, in Article 4, whether the I said 9, it's actually 7, I apologize. 7 capital vices are suitably reckoned. So you probably know these, perhaps you've committed them to memory, but how are they all, why are these the ones? And I'll read this in its entirety, the corpus, and this will finish out this question. He says that the capital vices are those which give rise to others, as he already explained, especially by way of final cause. Final cause is purpose or meaning or intent. Now, this kind of origin may take place in 2 ways. First, on account of the condition of the sinner, who is disposed so as to have a strong inclination for one particular end, the result being that he frequently goes forward to other sins. But this kind of origin does not come under the consideration of art, because man's particular dispositions are infinite in number. Secondly, on account of a natural relationship of the ends to one another, and it is in this way, most frequently, one vice arises from another, so that this kind of origin can come under the consideration of art. Now, I don't quite know why he's bringing art into this, but I'm not going to get too bogged down in all the particulars. Accordingly, therefore, those vices are called capital whose ends have certain fundamental reason of moving the appetite. And in this respect, of these fundamental reasons, that the capital vices are differentiated. They move the appetite, okay, for a desire, whether it be the will or the sensitive appetites. Now, a thing moves the appetite in 2 ways. First, directly and of its very nature, thus good moves the appetite to seek it, while evil, for the same reason, moves the appetite to avoid it. Secondly, indirectly, on account of something else, as it were, thus, one seeks an evil on account of some attendant good, or avoids a good on account of some attendant evil. Now, this connects so much to the passions that we talked about, the concupiscible, the irascible. I don't want to get too much into that, but hopefully if you've been watching all these videos, you can begin to see the connection between the passions, the sins, the virtues, the gifts, even the beatitudes. You know, it's all really connected. And so, again, man's good is threefold. For in the first place, there is a certain good of the soul, which derives its aspect of appetability, okay, appetite, desire, merely through being apprehended. That is, the excellence of honor and praise, and this good is sought inordinately by vainglory, which is also pride, right? So when we seek excellence, that, like we just talked about a moment ago, that would be the deadly sin of pride. Secondly, there is the good of the body. In this regards, either the preservation of the individual, that is, eating meat or drink, which good is pursued inordinately by gluttony, or the preservation of the species, that is, sexual intercourse, which good is sought inordinately by lust. Thirdly, there is external goods, that is, riches, to which covetousness is referred. These same 4 vices avoid inordinately the contrary evils. All right, so he's covered 4 of them so far. And then he goes, or again, good moves the appetite chiefly through possessing some property of happiness, which all men seek naturally. Now, in the first place, happiness implies perfection, since happiness is a perfect good to which belongs excellence or renown, by which desire we call pride or vainglory. So now he's talking about pride and vainglory again. Secondly, it implies satiety, which covetousness seeks in riches that give promise thereof. Thirdly, it implies pleasure, without which happiness is impossible, and thus gluttony and lust pursue. Okay, so he's really repeating in a different angle those same 4. On the other hand, avoidance of good on account of an attendant evil occurs in 2 ways. For this happens either in respect of one's own good, and thus we have sloth, which is sadness about one's spiritual good on account of the attendant bodily labor. Okay, I don't know if people really understand what sloth is. It has to do with a spiritual good more than just, not wanting to go to work and you're lazy or you don't want to mow the lawn, right? Or else it happens in respect of another's good, and this, if it be without recrimination, belongs to envy, which is sadness about another's good as being a hindrance to one's own excellence. Well, if it be with recrimination, with a view to vengeance, it is anger. Again, these same vices seek the contrary evils. All right, so there you have it. Those are the 7 deadly sins, with the first 2 articles talking specifically about pride and covetousness as the beginning and the root of all sins, and then the fact that 7 of them are capital sins, and then specifically how they relate to our needs for keeping our body or our species going or our own excellence. And so pretty interesting stuff. Thank you for watching, and I hope you're enjoying this journey through the Summa Theologia here on Study the Summa. God bless you.